Hello everyone, I'm back with a new video. About 2 weeks ago, I posted this post asking my subscribers what their ideal main cast for Thomas and Friends would be, so I could pick some and rank them from 1 to 10 based on how likely they'd be to actually, be the main cast. And it's been almost 2 weeks, so yeah, it's time for me to get started on this. So, starting with this one from Isaac's Workshop, he says his ideal main cast would be Thomas, Percy, Rosie, Gordon, Henry, James, Molly, Edward, and Emily. Now, Thomas, Percy, Gordon, James, those are the obvious picks because those characters have been at the front of the series since basically the beginning. Same with Henry. Henry is also a clear pick. Emily has been a main character since they introduced the STEAM team, so she makes sense. Edward makes sense because he's one of the original three railway engines. And Rosie makes sense because if you want to have a female character in the lead, she would make the most sense, seeing as she's a character that most fans like, and, not a character you just brought into the show with no prior warning and forced fans to accept. So yeah, but Molly was a surprising one, and I'm pretty sure there are also a few more that had Molly on this list, but yeah, we'll see. Honestly, this makes sense. If you needed a yellow engine, Molly makes more sense instead of bringing a new engine in and not developing her at all. And Molly just overall, I don't know how to say this, but I just prefer her design more. She feels more like a Thomas character in my opinion. For that, I would say this would be an 8.5. Actually, no, a 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10. Great cast. Next up. Alright, here we got one from Thomas fan number 123. His main cast is Thomas, Henry, Gordon, James, Percy, Rosie, Emily, Nia, Rebecca, and Ashima. Now, we already went through why the first few, Thomas to Emily, made sense. Rosie, once again, we talked about. Nia, Rebecca, and Ashima were ones I found surprising. Nia makes sense because Mattel has been pushing her really hard since Big World Big Adventures. She's one of the few female characters that Mattel hasn't given up on. And same with Ashima, although she isn't as much of a main character. Sure, she got an 80th anniversary re-release, and she was in All Engines Go, but she isn't among the list of confirmed characters for the new reboot. And Rebecca hasn't even been touched since the end of Wubba. He says that Edward and Toby will be secondary characters, which makes sense honestly, and their status will be more so similar to Diesel, which also makes sense since Diesel's a pretty prominent character, but isn't one of the main characters. Honestly, I like this assortment, and I'm gonna say this is about I'd say an 8 out of 10. Next up, we got Emerald Knight Productions, who has Thomas, Percy, James, Gordon, Henry, Edward, and Toby. Basically the main STEAM team from Season 8, minus Emily. Then we also got Donald, Douglas, and Stanley. Donald and Douglas make sense because they're legacy characters, and honestly, I wouldn't mind having twin characters in the main cast. Now, I feel like it would have made more sense to have Bill and Ben in the forefront of the series, mostly because they're more colorful, and they could do the thing where they did in the CGI series where they made one blue and one left yellow, so that way they could have not only a wider range of colors on shelves for engines, but also just a wider range of engine sizes, since Bill and Ben are the only standard gauge engines, if I remember correctly, that are smaller than like Percy. So, anyway, so I don't get sidetracked. Donald and Douglas are nice, but I feel like Bill and Ben would be more likely. And Stanley, honestly, is a great pick. I feel like Stanley was going to become a main character back in the Great Discovery days, like season 11, season 12. Honestly, what they did in the Great Discovery, the whole replacing Thomas arc, I thought that was leading to him becoming a main character. and not just being some random engine that almost no one knows that would last be seen in season 18, 21. But yeah, that's just my opinion. Overall, I like this cast, but I feel like Mattel would want more female representation. I feel like this is a good 8 though. You know, you got a good dynamic with James, Thomas, and Percy, Gordon, Henry, Edward. You got the main steam engines. You got Donald and Douglas there, and you got Stanley. Honestly, in the context of a show, this would actually really work well. So yeah, a great 8 out of 10 cast. Alright, next up we got the Little Western Official, who stated his main cast would consist of Jack, Alfie, Oliver, Ned, Patrick, Kelly, Isabella, Nelson, Buster, Byron, Max, and Monty. All-star cast, 10 out of 10. Clap it up for him. All-star cast. Alright, next up we have KeenFan13, who stated his main cast would be Thomas, engines 3 to 7, Emily, Diesel, Rosie, and Mavis. Now, Mavis was a surprising one. She's a great female character in my opinion, and I'm surprised they didn't really do anything with her past season 21. So, I feel like Mavis is honestly in the same status as Rosie in terms of characters. I'm surprised they didn't bring her back before, you know, bringing Rebecca in. And also, Diesel was a surprising one because he's never really been a main character since... Actually, he never really was a main character. In the early seasons, he was treated like the Railway series where they just brought him in when they needed a antagonist. During the hit era and CGI era, he was just there. He was basically there when they needed an antagonist for the stories. And then for All Engines Go, that's the only time he really became a main character. So Diesel makes sense, especially with his arc in the CGI series of trying to be better. And the last thing I need to mention is Edward being missing. Now, honestly, I don't mind Edward being gone because he is more or less the most nothing main character out of the classic main cast. Edward is basically the character they went to for advice or when they needed help with something, and that's really it. You can't really write stories with Edward without him being out of character. Honestly, this would be a 9 out of 10. I feel like you got a good lineup. Diesel and Mavis really work. Next up we have Miguel the Bean Engine, who says his main cast will be engines 1 to 7, so Thomas Latobi, Molly, and Rosie. Now, this honestly makes a lot of sense. Molly makes sense, Rosie makes sense, engines 1 to 7, I already explained. So yeah, nothing too out of the ordinary. I'll say a good 9.5 out of 10, honestly. Alright, next up we have Preston0633, who says Bash, Dash, Ferdinand, Charlie, Billy, Norman, Molly, and Thomas from All Engines Go. Okay. Alright, last we have YayPlungy, if I said the name correctly, sorry if I didn't. We have Thomas, Henry, Gordon, James, Percy, Toby, Emily, and Rosie, and Nia for the main cast, which, honestly, fair. That's basically what the main 2026 cast is going for, honestly. I like that. And as the secondary cast, we have Edward, Duck, Diesel, Birdie, Cranky, Salty, Stanley, Mavis, and the rest of the Nitrogen era characters. Now, I'm surprised that Stanley and Mavis made it into a lot of these lists. They're great characters, and I feel like they're really underrated when it comes to the fans. So I'm glad those were chosen. And also, I'm glad this guy brought up more of the, I guess, out there secondary cast. Like, most of these, if their main cast was just Thomas, Percy, and Rosie, they said their secondary cast will basically be the rest of the Steam team and a few select others. I'm glad this one actually brings up characters like Birdie, Cranky, and Salty. Anyway, yeah, this one is, I'll say, another 8.5 out of 10. a lot of these were really good, and I didn't want to do a lot of repeating ones. So a lot of the ones that were basically just the Railway series cast, or engines 1 to 12, or just the main TV cast, who didn't get into this. But I liked a lot of these, and a lot of these do make sense. And I wouldn't mind if a lot of these were chosen, so yeah, I'm recording this a bit after the original recording because I didn't like how the audio sounded. For some reason, it got really quiet at this point. But I wanted to say big thanks to everyone who commented and the people in the video. I might do this again at some point. I'm not sure though. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.